Hello, and welcome to our very first Bruin Family Insights virtual discussion. Our discussion is brought by the UCLA Parent and Family Programs. Throughout the academic year, we're going to explore a variety of themes that are relevant to our families and will help us best support our student. My name is Dan Lowe, and my wife and I have two Bruins in our family. Our older son, Christopher, just graduated with a degree in economics. And our younger son, Jonathan, is a mechanical engineering student starting his third year next month. We're also honored to serve as the co-chair-elect for our UCLA Parents Council. Tonight's conversation with our panelists will focus on transitioning to life at UCLA. So we're going to include some important campus resources, upcoming events, and tips for our students. My wife and I are so grateful for UCLA, and the transition for both of our kids as well as ourselves was incredibly smooth. When I think about the experience that we've had, I thought of three things. The first is the summer orientation for both our kids as well as us as parents. We're blown away with how informative those 3 days were for our students and that one day for us as moms and dads. It was also reassuring. There was a real sense of, we are glad that you're here at UCLA. We're proud that you're Bruins. And there was a sense of belonging and a connectedness that started right in the very beginning. And there was a confidence that the university would do all that they can to support our students through their journey as a Bruin. But it was also honest. They talked a lot about the quarter system and how quickly that moves. And so it opened our eyes as parents as well as our students to realize that they're no longer in high school and that the bar has been raised, but the university is there to support them. I also thought about the move-in weekend, and we've been there every year since our older son started college. And the move-in weekend just blows us away as we think about all of the staff and the student support, that as you drive onto campus, you see signs everywhere. There's students and staff supporting us in the transition. You pull up into the garage and the students come with the laundry baskets and empty out our cars. And then before you know it, we're in the dormitories. And I remember my younger son, when we got up to the 8th floor at Dykstra, the moment that the doors opened, the RAs yelled, "Welcome to UCLA." And we just crumpled up in tears because we felt that our kids were in great hands. But move-in weekend is also full of sensitivity. I mean, there's beverages, there's food, there's people ready to support, and there's even Kleenex for moms and dads because they understand how hard it is to say goodbye to our loved ones, whether we're 30 minutes away or 3,000 miles across the nation. And the third piece is the Parent and Family Programs Office. They're available for us as moms and dads, aunts and uncles, grandparents, cousins, with any question about anything. And getting to know the staff and the families involved with the Parent and Family Programs has made a huge difference for us. So we're really grateful for UCLA. We're excited to have two members of UCLA staff, Dr. Latanya Reese-Miles, Director for First Year Experience and the First to Go program, and Roxanne Neal, Assistant Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education, Director of New Student and Transition Programs, and also a Bruin parent herself. LT, let's go ahead and start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in higher education, and some of the things that you love about your role at UCLA?
Sure, Dan, thanks. First of all, most people call me LT, including students. And I recently completed my first year as Director of First Year Experience. I'm a Bruin myself, and I've had experience on this campus, particularly with first year students in a number of ways, including in the classroom as an instructor, as a member of the faculty and residence program, which we can talk about a little bit later, and now have a great opportunity to work specifically with first year experience, helping our students remain engaged and helping to contribute to the overall welcome and transition. Our office specifically oversees True Bruin Welcome Week, We help collaborate with the Move-In Assistant Program that you mentioned, and the Common Book Program, among other things that we specifically work with. But I think one of my greatest joys is being able to collaborate with other departments on campus, such as the Office of New Students in Transition.
And that's a great transition to Roxanne. Hey, Roxanne, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your educational background and what you love about your role at UCLA?
Well, thanks, Dan. My experience with UCLA has been quite vast. As Dan mentioned, and I'm responsible director of New Student Transition Programs. So I'm responsible for both new student orientation and new parent and family orientation. And I've been working at UCLA for 28 years. So I've been here a very long time. And I've also was a Bruin here as well. And as Ann pointed out, my son just finished his first year here as well. Just to make us a crazy Bruin family, my husband also works here and he also graduated from here. So we're kind of Bruins through and through. My responsibilities, like I said, focus on new students and making sure that they have a smooth transition to the institution. My position also works on the academic side of things, so I'm responsible for making sure that we have course enrollment ready to go for new students and that they get the classes that they need and the advising that they need during their time here. We also do programming throughout the year as well. We have what's called Orientation Part 2 in fall quarter, so that students who go through orientation who might maybe forget some things along the way, there's a lot of information, get a refresher on how to enroll in their classes, what classes to take, and just other things that they might be curious about during that time. And we also are involved with Bruin Day and Yield events, and of course, our own new student advisor staff is an opportunity for students to get involved as well. And we have, like right now, we have a staff of about 100 undergraduates who work as new student advisors. So that is an opportunity that new students can look forward to getting involved with as they, kind of start their time here.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I appreciate both LT and Roxanne sharing about your experience and some of the roles that your services organization plays on campus. When you think about some of the services that you've offered, like what you just mentioned, what would you say, how are they pivotal to the transition of incoming students and their families?
Do you want me to start? Or?
Yeah, how about Roxanne? Okay. That'd be great.
Okay. Obviously, orientation is a big one. It's sometimes the first step for all new students. We really try to blend in the programming things that will help new students to feel like they have a connection with the campus, but also that they have all the information that they need to navigate the institution, not just from the academic side, but on all the other ways that they can get involved and do volunteer work and get involved with research. And most of our students are obviously high achieving, so they're really trying to hit the ground running, and we want to try and support that in as much as we can. And just the way that orientation is set up, we really try to foster a sense of this is where you can start getting to know people while you're here and really get a chance to make some friends to really set that, get them started on feeling like they're that this is their home when they're here at UCLA, and that there'll be resources for them throughout their time, even if they're struggling with things along the way.
Well, that's great to hear. How about you, LT?
Sure, and then sort of picking up on that, I think as Roxanne mentioned, our students are high achieving, but they also like to have fun and they want to get involved. And we also like to think of them as whole people too. So, so being socially integrated is crucial to any student's success. And so after a student has completed orientation and is ready to start here on campus, like you mentioned earlier, right from the start, if they're living on campus, having a warm and welcoming move-in experience is really pivotal. Getting to know, again, for our residents, getting to know who's in their environment with them, from the professional staff to the student staff, such as their resident assistants or RAs who may be living on the floor with them. And then beyond that, once they're here, once they've settled and put their things in their room. What about the rest of the time? School doesn't even start for a whole week. And so some students wonder, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to make friends? Well, the nice thing about UCLA is that we have already structured environments for our students to get to know one another, to start making friends, to start to getting to know their academic departments as well. Greek life recruitment begins during Welcome Week. So there's so many activities, including an enormous activities fair that helps students identify some sources of support and also kind of find their people and find their tribe. So in the way of clubs and other activities.
I like that. The idea about finding their tribe and connecting with a group that they feel at home with. You know, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that new students face as they enter UCLA? How about LT?
I know one of the concerns they often face is what I mentioned before about being able to, it's no surprise that this is a large campus, right? So how do students begin to identify friendships and build strong peer groups? And so some students, you know, if they're extroverts, that may be a little easier than if they may be more introverted. But then the great thing about a campus like this is that you really will find all kinds of people here. And also, it's important for people to remember that university life is a great time to start to experiment a little bit and start to go outside of your comfort zone. So perhaps the identity that you had in high school may be something that you want to, you know, challenge a little bit and start to explore new interests, for example. I know when I think about my college experience, I was happy to be in a new environment with new people, so that I, you know, again, just felt comfortable exploring. I think that for many of our students, there are the academic pieces. I'm sure that Roxanne will touch on those, but am I going to have a friend often is their one of their early concerns.
Yeah, that's great. How about Roxanne? What have you noticed about some of the challenges that students face as they come to UCLA?
Well, you know, it can just to kind of, you know, piggyback on what LT was saying. I really feel like it can go either way. You know, it could be something where students just love the idea of taking advantage of every single thing that they can possibly do, and others might feel, you know, I just want to study really hard and not get involved, and then they might find a disconnect later of trying to figure out how to get their foot in there and really find their way. And so it's not that there's two extremes, but I think that there are two different approaches that students often take. I'm worried about whether I'm going to do well here, so I'm just going to focus on my studies, or, you know, I just focused on my studies so much in high school, now I just want to blend that extra thing in and really get involved. And what I usually tell, you know, my student staff tends to be, you know, a great access point, because we talk to them all the time about how they're usually trying to do everything, right? And so it's always, I think the word of advice for parents to give to their children is, you know, strike that balance. Find that thing, that way in which they can really get involved and really find that way to kind of make the outside the classroom experience, you know, just perfect for them, but also keep a weathered eye on the classroom experience and making sure that they have the time that they schedule for their studies. A lot of college, I think, in the growing pains for the first year is about figuring out how to put that schedule together, that it doesn't really have the same exact pattern as it did in high school. It's not, you know, this very set schedule, and the students have to set the schedule. So time management becomes an issue, and there's lots of wonderful things to take advantage of here at UCLA. So finding the way to get to those things, but also to keep mindful of, all right, I still need to make sure that I get my studies taken care of as well.
Okay, that's great. So Roxanne, for example, if a student came early in the summer for orientation, and then they got fired up for school and motivated and fell in love with Westwood, but then it's like maybe 2 months later, and then they come to the campus, and there might be a little bit of a crisis of confidence. How can I do this? Such a large university. Are there other programs in your department or services or resources that you would point them towards?
Right. No, there are lots. And I think that's one of the biggest messages we try to convey at orientation is there are lots of support services for students. My unit is part of the Division of Undergraduate Education, which is a large part of that is a counseling unit. So we have advisors, academic advisors for students to speak to about program planning, about getting some guidance on their degree and things like that. But also, if they don't know really where to start on, I don't know what major I want to pick, or I'm not really sure of if I'm going to be doing well academically, and they don't remember where to go, often those are great starting points for making referrals to things like tutoring or other departments for advising if they're thinking about a major that they're interested in. There could be several majors that they're interested in, and they might go to a workshop that might narrow down how that works. And a lot of them are offered through our division. A lot of them are offered through the Career Center, and they can find all those things out just by looking at My UCLA, because there are ways to sign up for workshops through My UCLA on a whole host of things, including on things that are offered through our counseling center, our Counseling and Psychological Services Center, having to do with managing your stress, or I'm not getting to sleep because I'm nervous, or I need to kind of figure out my test taking anxiety. So there's a lot of workshops and a lot of resources on a whole host of things that students can take advantage of. And it really just depends on what their issues are and what they would like to start with. But even if they went to an academic advisor, say, those advisors would know how to get them connected. And if they went to a counselor over in CAPS, those counselors would be able to refer them to academic counselors too if they said, I want to figure out my major, that kind of thing.
Well, that's really great.
Do you mind?
Yeah, sure, Alfie. Please, yeah, go ahead.
That was such a great answer, and also a great question. I'm glad we're early on talking about students perhaps experiencing setbacks or feeling uncertain about themselves. And I think it's important for us for students and families to know that feeling is perfectly normal and in fact may be expected, right? So I think as Roxanne mentioned earlier, our students are very high achieving, and so therefore it may be uncomfortable for them to be in a position where they don't know something, or suddenly the major, biology isn't what they thought it was going to be, for example, or they may be thinking about major changes, and that's okay. And I think oftentimes our students are comparing themselves to one another, such as their roommate or a friend that they made in class. And it's important for them to chart their own course, and most importantly, to seek professional advice. So friend advice is good. Professional advice is probably better.
Good reminder. Yeah, we need both. So I love the fact that UCLA has a First to Go and First Year Experience program. And so can you talk a little bit about First to Go and how this program further supports first generation students?
Absolutely. Sure, absolutely. And this is actually something that Roxanne and I also have in common. So by first generation, we mean students whose parents have not completed a 4-year degree in the United States. So number one, we're very proud to have a very large percentage of students who identify as first generation on our campus. That says quite a bit about their resourcefulness, their motivation, and their achievement. And then the second component to that is there is support for students on our campus for whom not necessarily they're literally the first, but the first generation in their family. So for those students, they may be understanding how to navigate on their own. Their parents may be in complete support of them, but just not familiar with the processes, such as completing the FAFSA or financial aid forms, understanding things like work study, understanding all the acronyms that we have on our campus. And so it's important for students to know that there are other students who are like them and who are coming from similar backgrounds. First to Go in particular, which falls in my area, is bringing students and staff and faculty together. So there's a whole community of support for those students. And so, for example, there will be a first generation welcome this fall. So students will get to identify who faculty even have their own shirts these days that identify themselves as first gen. And there's a new living learning community for first generation students. And there will be other community building events that will take place throughout the entire year. But I think we should understand is that this is a first generation friendly campus. We are a champion of first generation students. And so whether those initiatives are coming directly from my office or they're coming from other areas like the academic advancement program or just college counseling in general, that we are here to support students, those students we not just expect them to retain from one year to the next. Our expectation is that they're going to graduate and go on to achieve whatever their professional goals are beyond.
So maybe a follow-up to that, LT. Marianne submitted a question. What are the most difficult aspects of the first year experience for a first-gen student, and what are they for their parents?
Great. So first, we want to make sure to clarify that there are some challenges that the many first-year students face, whether they're first generation or not, such as making a transition from high school to college, that you're on a quarter system now, so the pace is quicker. What do certain majors mean and how do they translate into jobs? So a student may be feeling like, oh, I don't have this figured out and this person seems to. You know what? 9 times out of 10, many people are trying to figure those things out. So that's number one. But we do know that there are some specific experience, some unique experiences of first generation students. For some families, they do, because of the UCLA name, can recognize that this is a good school, but may not have a full understanding of what does it mean to be at a Research 1 institution, for example. And so they are so helping students recognize, well, what does that mean exactly? Do you have to do research? And what if you don't want to be a doctor? So there's that level of sort of unpacking what the university means. I know many of our students truly, because if you're the first in your family, you're not just going for yourself. You may feel like you're going for your siblings, you're going for your community. And so that may add a level of stress for our students. So we would just encourage open communication lines to make sure students are explaining to their parents like the decisions that they're making, and just having open dialogue. I think most parents are concerned like when they send their student to a school, but if you haven't seen it or you are less familiar with it, you may have some concerns that other families do not. We would certainly hope that, for example, our parents may feel like, oh, you did well in high school. You can balance 3 classes, right? You had 6 classes when you're in high school. Why can't you come home every weekend? Why can't you babysit your younger brother and sister? So that sometimes is a little more prevalent among first generation families, is having the student come home a little more often. Research tells us that if students are more involved, not too involved, but a balanced involvement in school, that they tend to do better. So if our parents can be more understanding if when the student has to stay late or can't come home every weekend, or perhaps can't come home for a couple of weeks, that it's because they are actively involved in the college process.
That's great. So Roxanne, let's take that a little further. So being a parent of a rising second-year student yourself, so you have advice that you give to parents, and now you have advice that you're also giving to yourself. And if a student is still struggling in the transition or struggling with loneliness or roommate issues or the academic challenges, or still trying to find their tribe, what advice would you give to parents in how they could communicate and support their kids?
That's That's a great question, and I think a really tough question too, because I feel like it's so individualized to the personality of your child and what they're going through and what it is specific, how they tend to approach their social world. But I think, and this is the advice and for those who have heard me speak at the parent orientation sessions this summer, I very briefly talk about my own son's experience and also how what my advice is to parents based on my knowledge and also having had someone go through it just recently. And I will say one thing is just being that resource for your child, both a good listener and also someone who can help them to navigate whatever it is that they're struggling with. A lot of it is just getting information, and sometimes that's helpful from orientation for the parents, but other times it can just be looking at the websites or looking at things, resources that they can see that maybe their child isn't really going and exploring on their own because they feel like, oh, I don't know where to start. And it can vary on what you would tell them in terms of that, but I think it's more just providing that information and then talking to them about how to make that decision. 9 times out of 10, when a student on my staff comes into my office, I approach it the same way that I would with my son. In fact, I had a counselor come in, one of my new student advisors came in earlier, and he actually asked me, he said, so do you give your son the same kind of counseling you give us? And I felt like it was perfect timing. It was almost like a plant for today. But I said, I actually do. I try to listen to what he wants to do, and I try to support that. And I actually listen to him because more often than not, and I tell my staff the same thing, they have the answer. They just haven't heard it themselves. They're telling you the answer. And then if you hear it and you say, well, it sounds like you have the answer you need, it's more that they just don't know how to take that first step, or they're scared to take that first step. So I think it's just being that cheerleader for them, that person that says, that's going to be in their corner for them and say, you got this. It's okay that you're nervous. That's completely natural, but you've got your answer, and you don't have to take what you think other people should do, telling you to do, or you shouldn't necessarily say, well, everyone is doing this, so maybe I should be doing that too. If they have that passion and it's just the fear of moving forward, I think it's a great thing for a parent to just say, I'm right here to tell you, you should go for it, and let them and give them that confidence. And if they don't know where to start, it's all about kind of looking up those resources with them. For living on campus, if they feel like they're not meeting anyone, I kind of jumped past that one a little bit, but I do want to circle back to it. I think one of the first steps is going to their RAs on the floor. They're fantastic people. They're students too. They're super well trained, and they can be that person that a student might go to and just hang out with, because that feels like the safest first step. And maybe they can go to them and say, I'm not meeting anybody, you have any advice? And usually there's programs on the floor that the RAs are doing to help facilitate that. So there's that step. But if that's not working out for whatever reason, the RAs can also point them in the direction of, things that they might be interested in, clubs and organizations they can get involved with. LT mentioned the enormous activities fair. That is a great first place to go. And even if it's a place where the students can go to do maybe a little homework, like they're not ready to go into doing the social thing their first quarter or maybe even their second quarter, tell them to go and look at all the places that UCLA, all the organizations that are out there, just to make mental note for later, because maybe there'll be a club they want to go follow up with later on that they know exists here at UCLA. And that enormous activities fair is a great first place to start.
That's good. Let's head back to the dorm. There's a question from Rakesh. And he said, my son is concerned about roommates. He has no idea who will be assigned to him. What options does he have if he is not compatible with who he is matched with? So either one of you would like to respond to that?
I'll jump in. I'm sure Roxanne will add to that. First, I would say the way one thinks about not knowing who a roommate is important. So rather than thinking about, oh, what if I don't like this person? Perhaps thinking about it as, wow, this is someone new who's a potential friend, or definitely a peer for me, because most of our first year students are living in the same situation. And what we find time and time again are students making some of their very best friends in their first year who were their roommates. So it is a great opportunity in the event that roommates are not compatible. Number one, the first step would be to help mediate with the RA that Roxanne just mentioned, because some of our students, just aren't quite used to figuring those things out. So they're young adults now. So how do you sort through just differences? But also keep in mind that I've said this before, we are not in the business of casting a reality show. So there is not this idea of putting two incompatible people together, or three people in a small space, and see what happens. There has been a process when students applied to live on campus. There were some questions asked about lifestyle preferences. Are you an early riser? Do you stay up late? So assuming that students answered honestly, they were matched with folks who have similar preferences. But if for some reason it also doesn't work out, do know that I believe it's every quarter, definitely the first 2 quarters, an opportunity for students to swim. Most people end up staying right where they are, to be honest. Roxanne, I don't know if you want to jump in here.
No, yeah, well, one, to answer the very, very first question, they'll start getting their roommates probably in the next week or so. That's usually right around where it happens. What I notice is that the students start either getting each other's number, they have each other's numbers, and they start texting like crazy. Like, I remember my son doing this with his roommates, just to scope out what they wanted to bring and what they wanted the room to look like, who wanted what, bed, everything was kind of going back and forth before they even met. And I think that that's a great first step. What I wouldn't encourage them to do is go overboard with looking at social media and suddenly making judgments about who their roommates are and whether or not they're going to be fun to hang out with. That is something they should save for the in-person when they meet them for the first time. One of the, again, sorry I keep putting a plug in for orientation, but we really try to foster this at orientation too. Keep the open mind, learn, you're going to meet a lot of people that are really different from who you are, and that's probably going to feel strange at first, but the best kind of strange you can imagine, because you're really going to get that opportunity to meet somebody that's different from you, and that could end up, as LT pointed out, being your best friend. So as long as they keep an open mind, it's going to be, I think the hardest thing for our students is just that there's no way to prepare for this other than to admit it'll be a little nerve-wracking and a little bit nervous, but it's a good kind of nervous. It's a nervous excitement, and then they'll be able to just kind of go with it and see where the social aspects kind of take them.
Wow, that's really good. LT and Roxanne, I appreciate just the openness and the reminder that this is all part of our development as young adults. So that's really good. So Maria has a great question about representing transfer students. What resources are available for my student to experience a smooth transition if she is transferring from another college?
I can take that one. If the student went to orientation, they probably already heard from someone from our Bruin Resource Center. We have a transfer center that has got a lot of different ways in which students can get involved, but also ways in which students can get supported. And one of the things that I think our transfer population likes the most is just meeting other transfers. I think there's a misconception that there is this huge number of first-year students and there's just hardly any transfers, or there's no way to meet them. And I think this unit and the center, the transfer center, actually allows for students to have that base. They actually already have a Facebook page, and I've noticed that a lot of the transfer students are already just going crazy on there, just asking each other questions and finding out how to get involved. And there's ways that they're going to be able to meet up during the True Bruin Welcome Week. So I think those are the great first steps, and it's a place where the transfers can find a home to meet other people that are going through the same thing, which I think is a great, a great resource for them that they may not know about.
Great. How about LT? There's a question from Portia, and she's wondering what support is available for students of color as they adjust to university life.
Great question, Portia. So no surprise, there's plenty, right? So I'll name a few. Let's start with our Community Programs Office, otherwise known as CPO. And that's located in the Student Activity Center. A lot of students gravitate toward there, especially if they are interested in community involvement and community outreach, and wanting to also diversify this, our student body. They're involved in a number of projects that range from healthcare to political things as well. And then I'm surprised we've lasted this long and not talked about the number of student clubs that are on our campus. What do you need, like 3 people in your club, something like that?
Yep.
And those, as you might imagine, those student clubs are as diverse and varied as our student body. So there's a lot of peer support. What I just described is mostly sort of peer support, but that's that's really specific to UCLA. And then we have academic departments that are specific, not that one has to identify personally with these, with, let's say, the Center for Asian American Studies, but know that there are centers and academic departments that speak specifically to some to particular racial and ethnic communities. We also have support for our LGBT identified students, undocumented students as well. I'm trying, Roxanne, I don't know, did I overlook anything?
I think you got the gist of it. Yes. There's a lot. There is a lot to look into.
All right, thank you so much, LT. So Roxanne, let's shift a little bit to academics. And one concern that both students and their families have is course enrollment. So we know that the students complete their first quarter during orientation, but how do students get their classes after that?
So in terms of enrollment for the next quarter, they do their class, they set up their classes much the same way they did at orientation. They use what's called a class planner on MyUCLA, and they give their appointment times for 2 passes. The first pass allows them to enroll in up to 10 units, and the second pass allows them to enroll up to 19 units. And that's, I'm talking about the College of Letters and Science. There are the other colleges like engineering and the arts and TFT, the theater, film, and television, have different capacities as well, but it's loosely structured in the same way. First and second pass, first for a certain amount, second for the rest. What to take? It really depends on where the student is at. If the student already knows what major they are pursuing, they can go to their department. Like, let's say I'm an English major, I can go to the English department and get some advice about what to take next. If I don't have a major at all and I'm undeclared, which is about 40% of our entering population are undeclared students, they can go to the college, their academic counseling for their college or their school, and start there and just start working on things like their general education requirements, or continuing to work on those, as well as starting to explore, well, what major am I interested in, or what major have I narrowed down for taking. In terms of enrollment and availability of classes, the quick answer to this one is it's all based on their class standing. So from graduating seniors to seniors, juniors, sophomores, and first-year students. And it's all done based on units. And the AP and the IB units are not calculated into that. So we get the true first, second, third, and fourth-year students. So that, seniors, when they need the classes, can actually get the classes they want, and the first-year students are working on their lower division classes and their prep for their major classes.
Okay, great. So Samantha has a question about faculty advising. How does the advising system work for freshmen? And also, will my student receive an academic advisor in his selected pre-major?
So I'm jumping in again, but so a lot of institutions, they have what's called a faculty advisor, and the faculty member is their academic advisor for what to take and how to, whether or not they're satisfying their degree. At UCLA, those are professional counselors in like the College of Letters and Science, in the School of the Arts, School of Theater, Film, and Television, School of Music, and Engineering and Applied Science, and even School of Nursing. I got them all. But they're professionals who are trained academic advisors. The faculty, that doesn't mean that students can't get involved with faculty. They absolutely can, but we really focus on it here having to do with research and getting involved with research projects and things like that. There isn't an academic advisor that is assigned to someone per se. Students have two big areas. One is their major, and the other one is just the general college or school counselor. So one does an evaluation of here's what you need to do for your major, and the other one has to do with here's what you're doing to satisfy your degree. So there are two resources which I would recommend that students take advantage of at least once a year. Some students in the very beginning will go every quarter, but at least go once a year. And I say that because even my own new student advising staff doesn't always go and see academic counselors like they should in the frequency they should. And it's just to make sure they're staying on target, that they've got the requirements and they're moving through the way they should and everything is fine. It could be a short appointment or it could be a longer one depending on what the student wants to discuss. But it's always a good, first step to just get that kind of set up. For winter quarter enrollment, the one that's going to be after this quarter, students can go to the orientation part 2 event that we have in November, or they can go and just see an academic advisor in their department or their college or school to see what they need to take for the next quarter. And if they want to get a refresher on how to do the enrollment, the physical, like how do I do this now that I'm doing it on my own, I'd say come to orientation part 2 because we will refresh their memories about that as well.
Okay, great. So maybe another question related to advising is, how often should the student see the advisor? That's Leanne's question.
So in terms of academic advising, it's like I said, I would advise at least once a year. And it really depends for the student on whether or not they want to recap the year and do it in the spring, or maybe mid-year, kind of get am I headed in the right direction? Sometimes students go in winter because they're thinking about what they want to take in summer. That's a good kind of strategy. And then some students go every single quarter. It really is up to the personal preference of the student. And I feel like sometimes it happens a little bit more in the beginning because the students are really trying to figure out, am I in the right major? Am I on the right track? And then as they kind of move into their junior and senior year, they might go once a year to just make sure that they're set for graduation. But I do think that it's good to go at least once a year. And again, more frequently as you start to explore what the major is and the right fit. And just one little plug about that too. In terms of what students pursue here, our students tend to look at a lot of different options. It's not just that one major. It could be a major and 1, 2, or even 3 minors. And they could be really different than the major that they've chosen. Be open to the idea that your child might come home and go, hey, I'm a pre-med, but a theater minor. I actually have a new student advisor who's that exact combination on our staff, and he absolutely loves the combination. So I think it's a great way for them to also kind of diversify not only their academic portfolio, but also it's another way of getting involved for them. It's an academic avenue for that, but they love pursuing those things. We have an entrepreneurial minor, for example. We have a food studies minor. So there's so many different ways. There's over 100 minors that students can pick, and those can also be dovetailed in with their academic program and really give them that kind of sense of, this is really tailored to me. And the academic advisors help with that process as well.
Okay, thank you. So LT, I think one of the natural concerns is going from high school to college, from where they're at to UCLA. But if they come from a very small high school, it seems like maybe the challenges could be even greater. So Alma raises a question. She says, my son comes from a really small high school, less than 90 seniors. He was always in small schools. And honestly, I worry about him failing falling through the cracks. What can he do to avoid it? So LT?
Sure. Well, thanks for that question. I think, first of all, that student is adding to the diversity of the population here. But secondly, well, I'll have a couple, I'm going to unpack that whole thing. So it's sounding like perhaps it's probably likely that that student is living on campus. So, so it's important for parents and families to remember, again, so we've got a whole week before classes start, and it's really crucial. And part of that is that sort of connecting with peers and identifying folks. One of the things I would encourage students to do, which often happens actually, is when they're living on the floor, is to keep the door open, get to know people. You're going to find friends while you're waiting in line at the bookstore, when you're waiting in line for Bruin Bash tickets, and Bruin Bash is one of our major events. So there are so many structured opportunities at the early parts of the quarter. I would argue, in fact, it may be a little too many for students to find involvement. And so, I'm not. I maybe wouldn't focus so much on what kind of high school the student came from, but start to think about what are their interests and start to connect with people who have similar interests as they do. And the high school part may not be as significant, to be honest. But we do recognize that many of our classrooms many of our courses are really large for students. But again, that's a matter of getting to know the teaching assistant, getting to know the people who are sitting around you in the lecture hall, and of course the faculty member, to sort of make that environment small. So rarely is a student just completely on her or they're on their own. There was another piece I was going to add to that. Oh, it also sounds like this may be the parent's concern. It might not be the student's concern at all. So I would say if Alma is worried about the student falling through the cracks, make sure that she connects with parent and family programs so that she feels supported for herself, so that she could be a good, strong support system for her student.
That's a great plug for the group that could not only provide good information, but also great emotional support, because there really is, there's a releasing of our kids to the university. Yeah. So here's a question by Jean. This is for students that come from out of state or even out of the country. For the students that come from far away, what are good times for parents to visit? And what is the good time for parents to leave LA and go back home? Like the day of the week, either Monday or Tuesday or after move-in weekend. What do you recommend in terms of supporting our students from out of state?
Do you want... Can I take this one real quick?
Sure. Yeah, Roxanne, that'd be great.
Maybe it's because I have a lot of international students on our staff as well. But I think, again, this is probably something that's going to obviously be more of a personal decision with your student. And I would say that this is not unique to international or out-of-state students. I think having a conversation before move-in weekend about what that move-in experience will be like is really important. Everybody's tense the day of. Sometimes it's tense excitement from the student and then tense sad from the parents. But I think having a conversation even prior to the packing up of the student, I think is important, about, what can we go to dinner after you get moved in? Are we going to say our goodbyes once we move you in? Like, get all that kind of situated beforehand. For the students, there's going to be activities that happen as soon as all throughout move-in weekend and into the next week, and they may want to go and do all those things. So don't feel bad if it's something where they are feeling like, I want to go and see all these people, I want to go get involved with all these things, because that's pretty natural. But if you have that conversation prior to the weekend about, all right, I know you're going to want to go and do all these things, but let's at least have dinner before, you know, you kind of take off, or something along those lines. I think that's helpful. And a lot of that when to leave aspect is also driven by when the student is moving in. So it could be that their move-in date is on Sunday or on Saturday or, you know, on Friday. And if it is, that obviously has an impact on, you know, how long you want to stay or how long you can stay. I think I've seen parents do all kinds of things. Some will stay later and just have a little kind of decompressing time for themselves before they get back on a plane. Other times they literally drop their student off and go, okay, I don't want to get in your way. We'll talk when, you know, the holidays come around. And and just to talk about that second part, I know a lot of it is driven by, you know, how far away and how much, you know, how much the family can afford to have someone fly back or come and visit. Just know that for the student, it's all about the breaks. So when it's the farther you are away, probably the best bet is the winter break, because that's the most time. Our Thanksgiving break is probably shorter than most schools. A lot of schools have a whole week. They start that weekend before and they have the whole week. We don't. We have classes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thanksgiving and the Friday and Saturday and Sunday off. So that's a really short period of time in which to try and visit with your child. But if you're coming from just a really close distance, that might still be doable, or your student would fly out at that time. That's just the issue with the Thanksgiving weekend. And for international students who are staying during the Thanksgiving, know that there are things planned during that weekend for those students so that they don't feel like they're alone. Because a lot of students will go home that weekend and it'll be kind of quiet here on campus, but there are things that are being planned. I'm actually thinking myself, for example, of hosting a Thanksgiving dinner for a lot of the international and out-of-state students who have to stay. And there are other folks on campus and alums who are doing the same thing. So just know that there are those kinds of things that are here, and that your students should look for them, because that can be a lonely time, and then they can feel like, well, I'm not you know, what am I doing here? Why am I by myself, kind of thing. So those are the kind of at least to the end of the year, those are the kinds of breaks that there are.
Okay, that's good to know, Roxanne. So LT, here's another question from an out-of-state vantage point. My son is from the East Coast and does not know anyone yet at UCLA. What are the best resources for him to connect? And do you have any suggestions for us if he mentions that he's feeling homesick?
Sure. I think well, first of all, I'm from the East Coast as well. But I think many of those resources have already been mentioned, so I'll recap them. Number one is his home, his new home, which will be the residence hall and the RA and the entire staff that's there. That includes faculty. We actually have faculty and residents, at least one in every, affiliated with every single community, every single building, in fact. So if the student is, sometimes they even have homesickness programs to help the students, you know, feel comfortable. And then some students, you know, students are very different. Some of them are going to find their home in their academic department. So they'll be close to a faculty member or an academic advisor. Some people, many of our students find their homes in activities. And so I'm just going to stress again, whether you're from the East Coast or not, is really starting to think about what your own interests are and starting to seek, and please continue to seek those things out. I would also stress, finally, get off the campus, get on the blue bus. We have a great, great public transit system here, and then, you know, some in the works. Go over to the beach and go check things out and explore. So go check out the Pacific Ocean and not just the Atlantic. Go to different malls and go with your floor. And they're going to be many of our RAs take students off the hill, so to speak, and into the local community. And so there will be opportunities for students to get involved. And so, of course, if they're feeling homesick, to just call as they need to. But I'll say, parents, that tends to drop off sometime around week 4.
Okay, great. So I want to bring up one final question for students as they transition to life at UCLA. So what are some of the events that are going to happen on campus to welcome students, as well as to help them get acclimated during the fall quarter? So why don't we start with you, LT, and then we'll go to Roxanne.
Sure, absolutely. So most students will have moved in by Sunday, and that first evening is our new student welcome from our chancellor, and that will transition into a student-run program about what it's like to be at UCLA and maybe experience a few setbacks. Since everyone on this call is here to get a special preview of our common book, which will be announced that day, which is the best we could do. It is a graphic novel, and it is addressing immigration experience, particularly Vietnamese refugees. And so that is an opportunity for students and of incoming class to have a shared conversation about a particular theme for the whole year. We have already mentioned the enormous activities fair, which takes place outdoors, where all student clubs and groups come out in Greek life, and students can either passively observe or actively sign up for things. Bruin Bash is a concert that students have an opportunity to participate in. One thing I'll mention, and I'll toss this over to Roxanne, we're excited about a conversation we're having with a professional staff member, along with members of some cast members from a popular TV show called 13 Reasons Why, because we do understand that mental health is a major concern on many college campuses. And so this will be an opportunity for students to hear about healthy ways of thriving on campus and what are resources available to them in the event that they may experience some level of stress or distress. So that'll be Wednesday night before classes start.
Oh, that's great. But Roxanne?
For Tribune Welcome Week, there's also academic open houses and welcome receptions by the divisions. I think we have one from the humanities division for students in humanities major, which will have a reception. The physical sciences is having a reception, but then all the academic departments will have open houses, and those will be listed on the Tribune Welcome Week site as well, where students can go and just have another opportunity to talk to an academic counselor in a department, explore that possible major. So that's also the day before classes begin. Throughout the school year, I would just tell the students to, keep a mindful eye to, we have our own the My UCLA page, but also the UCLA homepage for just different events that are happening. If a student is interested in sports, our football season is usually where a lot of students go to socialize and hang out too, even if they aren't that really interested in football or don't know anything about football. Some of our international center, DASHU, has actually events where the international students can get introduced to the rules of football as they go to their first football game here. But of course, our UCLA USC game is a big rallying point, and there's a bunch of events that happen that week. And then there are also art events that are going on constantly that students can go to for sometimes free and sometimes for really, really low prices. All of those things are available for students to take advantage of, and they'll hear about them throughout the school year. A lot of them are connected to just the general kind of connection to the UCLA community, like the UCLA USC, what I call Beat SE Week. But and then of course there are things that are just Bruin Pride kind of events like Spring Sing and just other events that students can take advantage of throughout the year. So it doesn't just end in fall quarter. There's lots happening throughout the year.
Well, that's a great way to wrap things up. I appreciate both Roxanne and LT sharing with us out of your expertise, your experience with other staff, and even collaborating with different departments on the university, and especially your involvement with students. And so we know that a lot of the things that you've shared with us relate to how UCLA is a large university with many resources, and the challenge is for students to take the initiative and to make the most of their experience. Because before they know it, that first quarter goes so quickly, and then first year is over, and then they're going to graduate in 4 years. And so we want to encourage them to really maximize the experience. We want to do that with moms and dads too, aunts and uncles, grandparents, cousins, to encourage your involvement at UCLA. And as LT shared earlier, you know, family members are welcome to be involved to an extent, and when families involved, the students get, I think, extra motivation to do well in their studies. So if you go to parents.ucla.edu, that's the website for the Parent and Family Programs Office, and you can go to the Parent Involvement and Support link, and you could just fill out a simple, you know, questionnaire which says, hey, you know, I'm available to volunteer and to give back to the university that is giving so much to our family. I'd like to encourage you also to be a part of our Bruin Family Weekend, which is October 20th to 22nd. We've been there every year. You want to take Friday off because it starts Friday morning. And so if you need to fly out, come out Thursday and soak in the whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And UCLA pulls out all the stops and letting family members know how much they take the education of our kids seriously and how grateful they are to us as family members. And so we want to thank those who are watching. Thank you for all those that have joined our conversation, submitting questions, and we want to let you know that our next virtual discussion will be on Going Greek, what to know about fraternity and sorority life at UCLA. And that's going to take place Wednesday, September 13th at 6 p.m. And so we want to thank you so much for being a part of this evening conversation, and we want to wish you a very wonderful evening, and go Bruins. Thank you so much.